Before we jump in, just a quick but really important heads up. This is all for educational purposes only. Please do not take any of this as financial advice. All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to break down what is a truly remarkable story, and it's all told through data. We're looking at a 9-day trial by fire for the PLAZM protocol, and this wasn't just a tough week, it was a period of unbelievable pressure that honestly revealed something incredible about its design. We're going to walk through the numbers that prove a pretty fascinating thesis. So let's just start with a basic question. What happens when any system, anything really, is put under extreme pressure? The typical answer is it bends, it strains, maybe it even breaks. But what if the exact opposite happened? What if somehow it actually got stronger? Well, this slide gives us a pretty shocking answer to that question, at least when it comes to PLAZM. On the left, you've got day 84. That's our starting line. On the right, day 93. Just look at these numbers. The total tokens burned didn't just nudge up, they exploded by 192%. The amount of PLAZM staked went up as people showed more conviction. The liquid supply, the stuff that's easy to sell, actually went down. And the bond engine, the protocol's heart, it grew. In every single category where you would expect to see weakness, we see strength. This is the core paradox we're going to unpack right now. Okay, so let's start with our first piece of evidence. The Great Burn. And look, this wasn't some minor thing. This was a fundamental shift in the token's entire supply, and it happened in just 9 days. This is all about turning pressure into permanent deflation. This timeline really shows you the relentless pace of it all. We started at the 3% of the total supply burned on day 84. Just a few days later, boom, we hit 5%, then 6%, then 7%. And by day 93, a staggering 8% of the total supply was just gone forever. It wasn't a one-off event. It was a consistent, accelerating removal of tokens from the system day after day. Let's put a hard number to it. 241,850 tokens. That's how many were just vaporized in this 9-day window. And to be clear, these aren't locked or set aside. They are permanently wiped from existence. It's a direct conversion of selling pressure into a stronger, scarcer asset. So, while the supply was shrinking on one end, something just as fascinating was happening on the other. And that brings us to our second point, the story of participant conviction and the compression of the available supply that came with it. Now, think about this for a second. In a period where fear and uncertainty should, in theory, make people sell, the exact opposite happened. The amount of PLAZM staked grew from 1.24 million to over 1.53 million. That's almost 290,000 extra tokens that people chose to lock away, signaling real long-term belief. That's conviction you can measure. And the result of all that burning and all that staking is a massive change in the supply structure. On day 84, things were split right down the middle, 50-50, between liquid and protected. But by day 93, the liquid portion, the stuff that's easily sellable, had shrunk down to just 44%. Meanwhile, the protected supply, tokens that are staked, burned, or in the LP, grew to become a 56% majority. So the takeaway here is absolutely crucial. For the first time, the amount of PLAZ that is freely available to be sold on the market is less than the amount that's being actively protected. That is a huge shift in the dynamics, and it profoundly reduces potential sell pressure. Okay, so the supply is tighter, and conviction is way up. But what about the engine that actually powers the whole system? Let's look at our third piece of proof, how the core mechanics actually got stronger under all this pressure.
The bond system, which really is the heart of the protocol's yield engine, didn't just hang on, it grew by over 8.3%. You can think of bonds as the protocol's productive assets. So more bonds means more firepower for generating real yield. This wasn't a system burning through its resources, it was a system actively leveling up its ability to generate returns.
And it's so important to remember how this works. This isn't some inflationary yield just created out of thin air. The system collects real ETH fees from DeFi activity, uses them to buy more bonds, those bonds earn real USDC trading fees, and that USDC directly funds the defense pools. It's this sustainable, perpetual loop that, over these 9 days, generated more than $2,800 in new profits. And here's what that real yield flow actually did. The defense mechanism put over $30,000 in USDC to work. And what was the result? Well, it funded the burn of those 242,000 tokens we just talked about, and it deepened the liquidity pool. The defense wasn't just a passive wall, it was an active force, converting market pressure directly into protocol strength. So all of this, it brings us to the climax of this entire period. Everything we just looked at, the burn, the staking, the engine growth, it's all been preparation for one final major challenge, day 94. And here's the number that has been on everyone's mind. Nearly 750,000 PLAZM are scheduled for release. On its own, that is an intimidating figure. It represents the single largest day of pressure the protocol is ever going to face.
But the protocol facing this test is not the same one from 9 days ago. This is the armor it has literally forged in the fire. Almost 250,000 tokens that could have been sold are already burned. Another 290,000 have been voluntarily locked away. The liquidity pool is deeper, and the defense treasuries are armed and ready. It's prepared.
And this is the light at the end of the tunnel. After this final peak on day 94, the pressure doesn't just ease up, it falls off a cliff. The very next day, the release size drops by 69%, and it just keeps moderating from there. This storm has a very definitive end date.
So what does this all mean? It really brings us to this core concept, anti-fragility. And it's not just about being robust or resilient enough to survive a shock. No, it's about a system that actually gains from disorder and becomes stronger because of the stress it endures.
This slide just illustrates it perfectly. It shows exactly how PLAZM has demonstrated that property. The expected response to stress was selling. The actual response was increased staking. Liquid supply was expected to grow, it compressed. The defense was expected to deplete, real yield kept it flowing. In every single instance, the protocol's performance was the anti-fragile opposite of what any typical system would experience.
So we can sum up this whole 9-day journey like this. 9 days, 242,000 tokens burned, 290,000 tokens staked, 6 percentage points of liquid supply compressed, every single metric strengthened. Tomorrow brings the final test, but the data has already proven the thesis. PLAZM gets stronger from stress. That's not hope, that's 9 days of evidence. And we'll end right where we began. Please remember, this analysis is for educational purposes. It is not financial advice. Never invest more than you're willing to lose, and always, always do your own research before making any kind of financial decision.